Hey everybody, this is your Right Geek and Honorary Man King here with another video. Today I'm going to talk about two mixed bag comics. Comics that had some aspects that were good, but then other aspects that made me ask, oh no, what is you doing? We're going to start first with Rescue 2020 issue 1. This is a comic written by Dana Schwartz, and your boy Zach didn't know who this woman was famous for, but she was trending recently because she complained about South Park promoting apathy, and based on her Twitter feed, she's very much a man-hater, but you know what? I'm not going to worry about what she is outside of this comic. I'm going to worry about what's actually in this comic. So this comic begins with an entirely unnecessary page in which we have Pepper being the smart kid in school who loves the science. As someone who actually has a bachelor's degree in neuroscience and is a woman, I'm actually getting really sick and tired of the women love the science trope. Women loving the science is usually written by people who don't know anything about science. So science is just about test tubes and things that sound slightly technical. But real science involves a lot of effort and dedication and trying things out and failing and then trying again. It is not this sexy profession where people do things in test tubes and look vaguely smart. So yeah, this entire page, first of all, does not advance the story in any way. It's just more feminist claptrap about how great and smart women are and how all women love the science, and it doesn't really add anything to the actual story of this comic, which takes place after issue 3 of Iron Man 2020. The real story is Pepper trying to figure out a way to bring Tony back, because as you know, if you watched my last video, the AI simulacrum of Tony Stark dies at the end of that issue. So now I have to figure out a way, well, we have to, in quotation marks, figure out a way to bring him back. So the story is she goes and she seeks out Tony's biological mother. And she finds Tony's biological mother trapped in her music studio. She's basically being held hostage. Yeah, her employees are being held hostage by these robots who are part of the robot revolution. And Pepper's like, okay, someone needs to tell me what this is all about. Incredibly disrespectful human interrupting performance. It's okay, Keys, calm down. She's a friend. Pepper, sit down, I'll explain everything. So apparently Amanda is just cool with being held hostage by these robots. And we see here that these robots just sneaking out to go to the bathroom. Zap! Youch! That kind of reminded me of Evergreen College, actually, where they wouldn't even let the college president go to the bathroom because you must sit here and listen to all of our stupid radical demands. So it made me think of that quite a bit. Yeah, so these robot revolutionaries, they're still radicals and terrorists, as they have been in the other issues of this event that we've read. But there is some good things about this comic. when we actually get to talking with Amanda about the possibility of bringing Tony back, this right here, when she says, "The man I met, the one who was calling himself Tony Stark, wasn't my son. He thought he was my son. I'm sure even you believed he was my son. But science isn't humanity. His brain and body were both built in test tubes. You can't bring a person back to life that way." That's actually good. That's this could have been an interesting reflection on whether you can, in fact, resurrect a person through scientific means. It touches on the idea that people have souls, and maybe you can bring back the body, but you may not be able to bring back the soul. It's a very interesting idea. The problem is that this interesting idea keeps getting interrupted by feminist BS. Zach talked about this page too, with Pepper complaining over the free Lamborghini that Tony gave her, which is definitely very petty and not like the actual Pepper Potts at all. As someone who actually knows Iron Man lore, I can tell you that Pepper Potts has always been very feisty. She used to give Happy a hard time in the very, very early comics before they actually got together and got married. But she was never petty. And their relationship in the early comics was actually... it wasn't like, oh, I'm the woman who's being held down by the man. Tony was actually a very generous employer, by and large, in the early comics. And, you know, if you fast forward to more recently, there's a lot that that Tony has actually done for Pepper that actually put a lot of burden on him. So, for example, in the Civil War event, Happy is grievously injured, and Pepper actually comes to Tony and asks him to turn off his life support using Extremis. And Tony is reluctant to do that because that's just one more thing that's going to be on his guilty conscience. But he does what Pepper asks. And then there are the times that Tony actually rescues Pepper in the comics. So there's, and you know, in this comic actually, he's even designed a happy AI for her. So there's so many things that Tony has done for her, and yet she's being portrayed as if she's petty and doesn't appreciate it at all. And that's just not in character for this character. And it distracts from the actual good idea that is embedded in this comic. Yeah, even on page 22 here, let's see. Come on. Go to the next panel, please. Okay. You know, you have Pepper saying here, "Do you believe in a soul?" And Pepper says, "I believe in people. Do you know why I've given so much of my life to Tony Stark? It's because I believe in him." Well, if you believe in him, why are you complaining about the Lamborghini? I'm so confused. So, you know, this is a comic that's sort of half and half. It's got these good ideas in it, but once again, we have this distraction of all this feminist claptrap that just has to be inserted just because, and it's completely unnecessary. Focus on the actual good idea. Focus on the question of whether we can actually bring Tony Stark back, whether that's feasible, whether there is such a thing as a soul, and whether we actually can bring a soul back. Those are the things that we need to focus on. and not so much on the needless feminist politics. Similarly, I read another comic this week that is also a mixture of good and bad, and that is Avengers 31, written by Jason Aaron. This one I decided to talk about because of something I saw Perch say on Twitter. So I said, yeah, I'll bite. Let's talk about this comic, because there are things about this comic that, like the other comic I reviewed, there are things about this comic that I actually really liked and were really good, like, for example, the art. But then there are things about this that are truly, what the hell? And the first aspect of the what the hell comes up here early on. What's going on here is we have Tony as a boy eavesdropping on this party that his father is throwing, and it's like this weird furry sex cult thing, which is definitely what? That's just coming out of nowhere. Okay. It was enough to say that Howard Stark was just an emotionally abusive father. You don't have to go all the way to he's actually literally demonic and was in a weird furry sex cult. That's just taking things a little too far. So we have this aspect of it, which is, it's just bizarre and unnecessary. But then you have things about this comic that are actually good, like this part. Come on, load for me, load! This part. So we have, the main story of this comic is that Tony has been thrown back in time, and he is about to be confronted by Mephisto in a second here. And he's trapped in this cave with no way to escape, and trying to survive. And we get here to page 20, where we have this little bit here. Luckily, I've never given a damn what people say. And then he says, okay, so your fancy armor is completely ruined, but Iron Man was never the weapon. I am. I love that. Also, the art's really good, as I said before. I love that, the idea, because as I've said in many previous videos, one of the great things about Iron Man is his superpower is his intelligence. The fact that he can get into really difficult situations, and even if he doesn't have his armor, he will still find a way out. And we see this here. But right now, I don't need to be redeemed, I just need to survive. And here's the thing that defines who I am in the best and worst of ways. He thinks, what do I have to work with? Nothing. I'm in caveman times in the middle of a blizzard that never ends. There's nothing here. Nothing but an ice age. Yes, that'll have to do. And the narration says, Tony Stark does his best work when he's working to not die. And then later on, we have this big reveal. I hate to say, don't you know who I am? But seriously, don't you know who the Stark I am? If not, please allow me to introduce myself. I am Ice Age Man. So we have Tony once again in this difficult position where he doesn't have all the resources that he would like to have, but he improvises. And that's one of my favorite things about the character is that Stark brand improvisation. When he's in a difficult situation, he can somehow find his way out using whatever is available. Like it said, if you stranded him in a desert, he would somehow build a jet out of sand and cactus needles because that's the kind of guy he is. I love that aspect of the character, and this part of the comic was great. Um, And we also have this bit in the narration too, which is also very much in character. I suppose that's why I've always built an armor between me and the world. An armor of wit, of iron, or of a bottle. Yes, very good. That's a very good in-character reflection on Tony and the whole concept of armoring. The fact that he's always protecting himself with a layer of something, whether it's literal armor or rather it's metaphorical armor that keeps him separate from the rest of the world. That's at least that is in character and is an accurate commentary on the character as he was originally written. We also have this interesting temptation here. You're a man of reason, Stark, and I've made you a reasonable proposal. This is Mephisto. Save yourself the trouble of ever being born. I will write you an entirely new life. One without Howard, without a heart full of shrapnel, without the demon in the bottle. I will make you Earth's mightiest hero, complete and unabridged. Tony Stark, the one and only Avenger. I've got a better idea, and I'll tell you all about it, says Tony. In a million years, and he fires at him. So he gets tempted with basically the removal of all his flaws, and he says, nope, those flaws are a part of what makes me who I am. And that's really great too. That's I like that part, and that's an interesting temptation to present in front of him because the heart injury and the alcoholism are all things that have troubled him throughout his life, and yet he decides, no, I'm not going to leave those behind because they are an indelible part of my character. I like that too. So, there's so much that is good in this comic. If only we didn't have the ridiculous, weird furry sex cult. And Howard being a servant of Mephisto. Yes, master, I am yours to command. All hail Mephisto. It's this comic has schizophrenia. Sometimes it has really, really super good Tony Stark characterization, and then sometimes it tips into the ridiculous. And we need to cut the ridiculous out and just focus on the actual character. That would be my suggestion from here on out. Also, I have one question. What does this have to do with what's going on in the Iron Man comics right now? Usually, if there is a contradiction between comics, there'd be some editorial note saying, oh, this happens before the robot revolution or whatever, but we don't see any editorial note like that here. And I think that's something that we can point to the weak editorial that we have at Marvel right now that is causing so many problems at Marvel. There's no control of the continuity anymore, and that's causing a dip in the overall quality of the stuff that's being put out. No one seems to care now if all the books are consistent with each other. They're just putting out whatever, and who cares if it lines up with what's going on in other books. That's not how it used to be. It used to be that if Thor was back on Asgard during an issue, but we needed him for an issue of the Avengers, they would just say, okay, so Thor is here in the Avengers, and yes, in his own book, he's back on Asgard. We'll just say that this volume of this issue of the Avengers takes place before he goes to Asgard. And they'll put a little note there so that the readers will be like, okay, continuity is still preserved. We're all good. And there's just no quality control anymore. And that's really a shame. So those are my comments on Rescue 2020 #1 and Avengers #31. I hope you enjoyed my commentary, and I will speak to you again on Monday night.